So hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. My name is Wes Purvis, and I work for Cisco, based out of Richfield, Ohio, which is in between Cleveland and Akron in the great state of Ohio. So I'm here to talk about 802.11 aggregation. I think it's something that's often overlooked. And I don't have very much time, so I'm just going to dive right into it. So how does 802.11n or AC achieve high throughput? Well, there's four main ways. The first is through increased modulation. So with 11n and now 11AC, there's different modulation schemes. 16 QAM, 64 QAM, and now 256 QAM. Basically, putting more bytes on the air. That's a way to increase throughput. The next is increased channel bandwidth. So this is a 160 megahertz channel screenshot. And so that's 8 20 megahertz channels. That's a lot of bandwidth, right? No matter how impractical, but it's you can really push a lot of throughput like that. MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, or both single user and multi-user. Basically being able to transmit multiple transmissions to a client or multiple clients at the same time is really useful for being able to increase throughput. And then finally, there's frame aggregation. This is kind of, I think, the unsung hero of throughput because as you have either good or poor RF conditions, your aggregation will increase or decrease, having a dramatic impact on your throughput. So why aggregate? Imagine that you're on your commute to work and you're in your car, everyone's in their car, and so there's a lot of traffic. Things aren't really moving so well. If you were to put all those people into a bus, that's much more efficient. You've removed the overhead. And that's basically what aggregation does. It removes a lot of the overhead and makes Wi-Fi a whole lot more efficient. So what are the different aggregation types? First, you don't aggregate at all. So you have a PHY header, MAC header, MSDU, and then there's an acknowledgement for that frame. It's a one-to-one acknowledgement. This is what you had with legacy 11A. And it works well, but it's just not very efficient. Then there's AMPDU aggregation. Now this is the most common, and it provides a tremendous increase in throughput. So basically, you send a whole bunch of MPDUs at once, and then MPDU is the MAC header and the MSDU. And so you basically save yourself from retransmitting the PHY header as well as the acknowledgements. And so there's just one acknowledgement for, let's say, a client can do up to 64 frames in an AMPDU. So it's a tremendous way to remove your overhead. But the best way, the most efficient aggregation is AMSDU aggregation. It has the most upside, but as I'll show on the next slide, it also has the most downside. So you basically think of this like long frames over the air. Let's assume each MSDU is 1,500 bytes. So this will be a 6,000 byte frame over the air, which is great when it works. The next, then you kind of have the best of both worlds with AMPDU of AMSDU aggregation. So you're still doing long frames over the air, but you're also breaking up the MPDUs so that if you have an error, you don't have to retransmit as much. So let's go through some of the failure scenarios. So in the non-aggregated world, if you have a bit error and you need to retransmit a frame, you're retransmitting the frame. It's really not a big deal. You have the PHY header, the MAC header, you have the whole shebang, but it's just one frame. It's the same thing in the AMPDU world. You're basically just retransmitting that one frame, and in fact, that one frame could be added to the next AMPDU. So it's really not a huge penalty if you have to retry. In the AMSDU world, however, if there's a bit error and you have to retransmit, you're retransmitting everything. So you're retransmitting that 6,000 byte frame, which in poor RF conditions will really not work so well. So then there's AMPDU of AMSDU, and so if there's a failure, you're only retransmitting that MPDU. So in our 1500 byte, this would be 3,000 bytes instead of 6,000 bytes, which it's half the data. It adds up. So how does aggregation help? So this is a model, a throughput model of PCP throughput versus AMPDU size. So going from 1 frame up to 64 frames, which is maximum that you'll see, and for 1, 2, and 3 spatial stream. Now, some parts of the model are a little bit optimistic. You're not going to exactly see all, that throughput today because of system level or RF level bottlenecks. I think as as chipsets and digital designs improve, you'll get closer to these limits. These little blue lines are kind of what you'll see today in terms of single client throughput. And one more thing on the model, it's an optimistic model, but it's not a perfect model, right? So I think there's like we assume good RF conditions like 2% packet error rate. So this is not like a cabled RF model, which throughput would be even higher. So the next graph is same thing, TCP throughput, but versus AMSDU size. So 1, 2, 3, or 4 frames AMSDU. And so most vendors are doing 2 frames in AMSDU. Some do 3, but 2 is the most common for a client and APs. But you can really, you see that there's a tremendous benefit to aggregating and using AMPDU of AMSDU aggregation. So let's go through a little bit of structure. I'm almost out of time, but just a couple things I want to point out. If you take a Wireshark capture, so you'll know an AMPDU because it's a whole bunch of data frames butted up against each other, and then with a block ACK at the end. So if you're looking for RSSI, you'll find it only on the last frame of the AMPDU. If you're looking for beamforming information, you'll find it on the first frame. We can see that these are 3,000 byte frames, so you can surmise that we're doing two AMPDU in AMSDU. If you want to see what let's say 8 MSDUs in an AMPDU, this is totally impractical. You're not really going to see this. That's an 11,000 byte frame over the air. Could you imagine retransmitting that? So when does aggregation not go in our favor? Voice, right? Real-time applications. There's a reason that most vendors don't aggregate the voice queue. When you aggregate, you kind of buffer frames on the AP, and wait a certain amount of time for frames to come in, and then spit them out to the client. There's no point in doing that to voice, because if you do, you're going to introduce delay and jitter, and voice doesn't work well. So, what do we say? Is aggregation our friend? I mean, I would contend, you betcha. It's really important for Wi-Fi, and the speed increases in Wi-Fi with 11N and 11AC. But sometimes it gets overlooked. And that's it. I came in under time.